Hello, this is Sharon here again, representing the Citizens Action Team. In my first video, I talked about bilingualism in Canada and its impact on both democracy and equality. Now that I've set the stage, let me move on and tell you a little bit about the situation here in New Brunswick. Through declaring itself as New Brunswick's only bilingual province and adopting the Official Languages Act, New Brunswick assured its citizens, both French and English, that they are afforded language rights at the provincial level as well as the federal level. With 32% of the provincial population reporting its mother tongue as French, this seemed like a good idea. The reality of it, however, has been very different. The application by government has not been one of equality and democracy. It has instead been one of force, discrimination, and suppression. It does not protect and promote both of our linguistic communities. It escalates and encourages tensions and distrust. It further separates us by forcing constant and continuous competition and active opposition. It forces our citizens to have and to use both official languages in order to be employable, despite being assured under the Charter that both English and French are the official languages of Canada and have equality of status, rights, and benefits. Our government has applied a blanket approach to its application of the Official Languages Act without logic, reason, or consideration of need and of linguistic demographics in the various regions. Our government amends regulations indiscriminately, without consultation, and against the interests of its citizens. It uses language as a tool for its political belt to essentially buy votes. Slightly over 40% of all public sector and civil service positions have been mandated as bilingual, and this number is increasing daily. This mandate also extends to any business or industry that provides service on behalf of government and can include janitors, yard maintenance, laundry, painters, drywallers, paving crews, security guards, plumbers. You get the idea. Oh yes, and alcohol. New Brunswick Liquor is a government entity, and it is required by law that individuals be able to select and pay for their alcohol in the language of their choice, regardless of the linguistic demographics of the region. Our government refuses to allow the use of translators or interpreters. It expects that any person in any part of the province should be able to immediately be greeted and served in their language of preference, regardless of the demographics of the region, the demonstrated need for or use of the service, the priority of the request, or any sort of logic or reason. For example, while Ontario makes use of a 911 translation service that handles 170 languages, New Brunswick mandates that every ambulance in the province must carry one bilingual paramedic at all times, regardless of region or linguistic demographics, which in some areas are less than 3% minority populated. This mandate has resulted in many tenured, skilled professionals being pushed out of the field, while New Brunswick recruits paramedics in Ontario and Quebec to meet language quotas. It means that our own highly skilled paramedics are unemployable, and many end up leaving the province to work elsewhere. This same mandate applies to public service in any capacity, and unfortunately, it's now impacting the private sector as well. With more and more people from small rural communities moving to urban areas for employment opportunities, our communities are blending more and more frequently, and there has been a push on the private sector to accommodate minority language customers. Every day, more and more businesses are electing to post employment opportunities as bilingual required in an effort to meet these requests. This requirement excludes our more than 67% unilingual population from employment eligibility. It also creates a wage competition as businesses compete for the few bilingual workers that we do have and are willing to pay those workers more than a unilingual individual for the same work. Recently, we have seen positions posted for forklift drivers, warehouse workers, lawn maintenance, pizza making, accounting, data entry, cleaning animal pens at an animal shelter. All of these posted with a bilingualism requirement. Many of these postings are listed as requiring no high school or only a high school education, no experience, no certification, no skills, part-time, paying minimum wage, but you must be bilingual. New Brunswick's Language Commissioner has recently made a recommendation to require all senior managers in the public sector to be bilingual. She has publicly stated in her annual reports, as well as in interviews, that in New Brunswick it is not acceptable that senior positions can be filled by individuals who are unilingual. Cities are mandated to comply with the Official Languages Act. Towns, villages, and municipalities with a population of 20% minority language population are also required to comply. This includes the requirement to publish the minutes of municipal or council meetings in both official languages, regardless of whether or not there has ever once been a request for them. Oddly enough, the city of Miramichi, which has a French population of 8.23%, is under a very public attack by the Language Commissioner for failing to comply in a timely enough manner to suit her. Her complaints range from requiring the city to publish the minutes of council meetings in both languages, up to and including a demand that the city repaint its water tower to reflect both the English and the French languages. This water tower was built in 1977 and proudly declares Miramichi to be Canada's Irish capital. At the same time, the city of Dieppe, which has a 23% English population, almost 3 times the minority population of Miramichi, has declared itself not a bilingual city, but a francophone city. They have enacted laws requiring all business signage to be displayed in French first, and they fine businesses who do not comply. This action by Dieppe is apparently fine with our Language Commissioner. New Brunswick supports a system of linguistic duality, not just in education as guaranteed by our charter, but in work and life spaces as well. This system is designed to provide duplicate and equal systems and services and is at significant financial cost. Even though these duplicate services are in many times not used, they must be available regardless. There are reports of situations in which translation interpretation services have been available at every municipal or legislative meeting held for over 10 years, yet no one can once remember these services being used. The cost is staggering. New Brunswick operates 2 healthcare authorities, one in English and one in French, and although both are designated as officially bilingual, there is a duplication of services between the two, while other essential services are critically underserviced. In some situations, these duplicate services exist within mere blocks of one another, and often one is overwhelmed while the other is understaffed and underused. If you have been following the news at all, healthcare in New Brunswick has deteriorated to the point where there are third world countries providing better care. Hospitals are canceling surgeries due to a shortage of available beds. Patients are being housed for days at a time on gurneys in hallways, alcoves, kitchenettes, and 5 to a room. In some cases, patients have died in hallways, surrounded by their grieving families without dignity or privacy. Why? Because 25 to 27% of acute care beds are occupied by senior citizens, by special care, or by long-term care individuals who have no medical need to be hospitalized, but who have nowhere else to go. New Brunswick does not have the facilities for them. This lack of facilities has been known for more than 20 years, but has not been addressed by either the Liberal or the Conservative governments as they continue to play linguistic tug-of-war with our province. Recent suggestions that the 2 healthcare authorities be merged at an estimated savings of $40 to $60 million were met with a flat no by Minister of Health Victor Boudreau. $40 to $60 million would provide a lot of nursing home or special care beds, but the answer is no. In 2014, the former Minister of Health, Conservative Blaine Higgs, was also asked why we could not merge the 2. His response? We could, but that would make sense. It was suggested that it would be political suicide to actually do it because it would lose the Francophone vote. School transportation is a hot-button issue here in New Brunswick, one that is actually being taken to court. Having operated a dual busing service since the 1980s, one in French and one in English, It was recently suggested that cost savings could be found by having English children and French children ride together. After all, in some areas we have full-size school buses traveling up to 50 kilometers one way, carrying only 2 to 3 students. The response was again a flat no. It is perceived as a constitutional right to have our children bused separately according to language, regardless of whether or not numbers warrant it. The truth is that children have continued to ride together in some areas of the province for the past 20-plus years with no problems. However, Minister of Education Serge Roussel, who claims that he was unaware that English and French children were traveling together, became immediately angry upon finding out and announced that he would put in an immediate stop to the practice. After being publicly challenged multiple times on his stance, he announced his intention to place the matter before the courts as a referendum question. Is there an obligation to provide distinct school transportation in relation to one or the other official language? Despite the fact that this is a yes or no question, and one that is a question of law and which should be answered by the law courts without influence or manipulation, 2 Francophone associations have already announced their intention to seek intervenor status, allowing them to make presentations to the court, and they have announced that they intend to apply for government funding to do so. Also before the courts is the attempt to segregate daycares into language-specific facilities, thus further segregating our English and French children, as well as further isolating and damaging the relationships between our 2 linguistic communities. While 71.2% of our 33% Francophone population is considered to be bilingual, only 15.9% of the majority Anglophone community can say the same. During more than 40 years of official bilingualism, New Brunswick has failed to provide or make accessible the education, training, or environment to allow its majority population to learn the minority language. The French communities claim that they have achieved bilingualism through their daily activities, such as watching television, playing video games, listening to music, reading, shopping, playing and interacting with their friends and neighbors, as well as through cross-marriage. Yet Anglophones are denied this same right to intermingle and to learn the French language and culture because it is feared that there will be assimilation. The truth is that the use of French in the home has been decreasing year after year, and Vice President of the Francophone Teachers Association, Lucie Martin, states that as many as 90% of Francophone children are entering the education system unable to or barely able to function in French. As I speak to you here today, New Brunswick is in a critical state. The province is on the verge of bankruptcy. We have been asked to accept more than $600 million in cuts to education, health care, and services. The assets of our seniors are being reassessed and targeted for additional funding. Tuition rebate programs have been cut. More than 300 teachers and support staff are being cut, and 12 schools are being closed, all of them English schools. Many healthcare services are being privatized, and our economy is and long has been in decline. Our population is aging, and our young, able-bodied taxpayers are leaving the province in droves to seek the means to support themselves and their families. New Brunswick lost more than 900 people in the first 3 months of 2015, 3,500 in the past 3 years. It's the worst decline in 35 years and the 17th straight consecutive quarter of population decline. In 2014, for the first time, New Brunswick recorded more deaths than births. We are warned that even more substantial budget cuts are coming next year. I want to tell you about 2 situations that have happened just in the last 2 weeks and that demonstrate the reality of life in New Brunswick. The first situation occurred in Fredericton, the provincial capital, which in 2011 reported a 75.6% English-only population, 23.6% bilingual, and less than 1% French-only. The situation involved a commissionaire with 12 years of tenure and who was only 10 months away from retirement. You see, an individual from the province of Quebec complained because the commissionaire was unable to serve them in French. Even though the offer was made to get someone from the back who was bilingual, a complaint with the language commissioner was still filed. This complaint resulted in the man 10 months away from retirement, being advised that his employment was being terminated as a result of being unable to speak French. Fortunately, a local video blogger heard about the story and got involved, creating a number of videos which collaborated and validated the story, including one in which he confronted Minister of Official Languages Donald Arsenault. The public outcry was instantaneous, and 2 days before being let go, it was announced that the commissionaire would not in fact lose his employment. However, he still would be transferred to another position and location. Upon being asked, this commissionaire advised media that he was ordered not to speak about the situation, and other commissionaires at the same location, when approached, also indicated that they were ordered not to speak about the matter. The second situation, also resulting in a complaint to the Office of Commissioner of Official Languages, resulted when a customer was unable to pay for their alcohol at a third-party authorized vendor location in the language of choice. Really, over alcohol. This is the reality in New Brunswick. Electoral boundaries in New Brunswick are routinely being redrawn to promote partisan powers. However, on March 28th, it was announced that the Gallant Liberal government was proposing changes to the electoral map to better reflect linguistic lines in the province, partially in response to 2 threatened lawsuits by Francophone groups. Donald Arsenault, the minister responsible for official languages, said that he wasn't worried that a future riding could be as much as 25% larger or smaller than other ridings, something that could make one vote in a particular riding weigh heavier than a vote in another riding. There's population, he said, but you also have to consider linguistic communities. The majority population in New Brunswick is still predominantly English, more than 65%. However, we also have a unilingual Francophone population, and both of these populations are facing increasing discrimination every day as we are denied employment, the pursuit of our chosen professions or careers, advancement based on merit, not just in the public sector, but in the private sector as well. It all boils down to language. If you go out into our communities and you talk with the people, whether they're in Woodstock, which is predominantly English, or in Caracat, which is predominantly French, people are concerned. The average, everyday citizen does not want this division. They do not support what is happening, and they believe that the situation has to be addressed. Yet nothing relating to language or to duality is open to discussion. The general feeling among citizens is that this is a power struggle, and that it's being driven by a radicalized force, possibly from outside of the province, and possibly throughout all of Canada. Many of our citizens have recently written to or arranged meetings with their MLAs to discuss their concerns. The responses received have been alarming. There have been primarily 2 reactions to these meetings: the "there's nothing wrong, go away" brush off, or with a surprising frequency, a warning: don't rely on the government, we will not help you. It's not in the interest of our party to help you. You must help yourself. One MLA, when recently asked if the situation in New Brunswick could be considered genocide, remained silent for several seconds before lowering his head and declining to comment. If you do not know what exactly genocide is, it is not necessarily, as we so often hear on the news or in history, the mass killing or extinction of a race, religion, or culture. Genocide is also defined as being more often than not committed by the officials in power of a state or area. It is intended to signify a coordinated plan of different actions aimed at the destruction of essential foundations of the life of national groups, with the aim of annihilating the groups themselves. The objectives of such a plan would be the disintegration of the political and social institutions, of culture, language, national feelings, religion, and the economic existence of national groups, as well as the destruction of the personal security, liberty, health, dignity, and even lives of the individuals belonging to such groups. Attempts by political figures, representatives of healthcare, representatives of education within the province, to speak up have been increasingly met with hostility, intimidation, and suppression by the government. To attempt to even discuss language or duality labels you as a bigot or as anti-French. Out of desperation, citizen groups are forming all over the province, some physically, some through social media, all to fight forced bilingualism and further division of our citizens and communities. These are not people with a hatred towards either French or English. These are people who are fighting for the right to pursue their careers, to be able to support and provide for their families and loved ones, to be meaningfully and gainfully employed, to participate in government, essentially to be allowed to live and enjoy their lives and the freedoms and opportunities guaranteed us under the Charter here in New Brunswick. Some of these groups have acquired over 10,000 members and are taking active steps against current policy. There are increasing cries for civil disobedience, and temperatures are running very high. The situation is, to put it bluntly, volatile. I am appealing to every person, whether a citizen of New Brunswick, a Canadian, or from outside of the country, to pay attention, to hear us, to speak up, to come to our aid. We need your help. Anyone who would like more information on anything that I have mentioned here today can email us at the address shown on the screen, contactc.a.t.nb@gmail.com. We will be happy to supply you with documentation supporting our claims. Thank you for your time.